home church. I've been here 22 years, as long as I've been married. In my opinion, broadly speaking, mainstream church, for one reason or another, typically seems to either want to ignore or finds it too difficult to help people who have done time. Sadly, some people like that often prefer church to be more of a monoculture. They perceive it maybe as just a church is just for nice people, for good people, or something silly. For others, they want church to be inclusive, but they really just have no clue where to start. And for others, there'll be churches that have given things a crack, and for one reason or another, probably not long enough, have a shot at it for long enough, but for one reason or another, they've just found it as a negative experience and throw it in a too hard basket. If you're like me, that's frustrating, because we're doing all our bit. I was a former Anglicare prison chaplain 8 years ago, and you do your bit in the institution, and you want the church to step up and do their bit, but they just don't consistently, or they just don't know yet. Well, I found a number of things that a good Bible-based church can do to better reach out and connect with this largely untapped group of people, often disadvantaged people. During my 8 years so far as a community chaplain in the southwest of Sydney, I've been blessed to be able to try a bunch of new things. God's graciously allowed me to make plenty of mistakes along the way, but that's how we learn. We try stuff, give it a shot, see how it goes. But I've been able to learn from each one of those mistakes. So over time, by persistence, thinking outside the norm, trialling innovative ideas, trusting God, being proactive, I've discovered a bunch of things that churches can do in this area of life after prison, including being intentional, building relationships between churches and organisations like Anglicare, as well as organisations outside normal church circles, working in partnership with government departments and non-government organisations, all without compromising the gospel. Now, let me jump back and fill you in on a bit of history to see where I started and where I got to. So you may not know this, but the topic of life after prison was originally the name of an Anglicare ministry. 20 years ago, there was an Anglicare chaplain, Mari Percival. She was the chaplain involved with LAP at the time, Life After Prison. It ran just across the road from Parramatta Jail. As I recall it, it was a bit of like a halfway house that supported guys so they can sort of, get set up with Centrelink and better transition back into the community. It was the year 2000. How do I know this? Because I actually went along there to the Bible study. It was one of the things that Mari was running for these guys. Sadly, the funding ran out sometime later, and Anglicare had to can it. Again, another forced change, as you're talking about before, Steve. In 2009, I started a conversation with Steve House and another guy, Andrew Carter, some of you guys might also know, who both worked at the time at Silverwater Correctional Complex, where I also worked. They as jail chaplains, and myself as a project manager for an electronic security firm. And as a result of those conversations, their prayers and their encouragement, it became apparent that God was moving in my heart to have me pursue work of more eternal significance. So I approached Moore College as a step towards becoming, hopefully one day, an Anglicare prison chaplain. So after my interview with Andrew Ford at Moore College, that's where he worked at the time before he became, I guess he's the boss of Anglicare chaplains, like on top of the tree sort of thing, yep. He was doing the filter interview for me at Moore College. Must have done something right, he didn't reject me at that point. So I signed up and did a one-year full-time course called Bible and Ministry. It was a diploma to get a one-year full-time theology under my belt. About halfway through doing that course at Moore College, it became very, very clear to me there was going to be no full-time positions for prison chaplaincy out the other side. It suddenly dawned on me that God might have a different plan to mine. So while at college, I was doing some work experience at MWRC at Silverwater. I was able to talk to some of the residents there about this topic of post-release ministry that was bouncing around my head. I heard many stories of ex-residents who had a genuine fear of rejection from church and church people. To make matters worse, some who courageously ventured into church had those fears confirmed. So in response to that need, early 2011, I put a proposal into Anglicare to consider me to do some post-release ministry. I believe God was prompting me to be an icebreaker, to be someone who would be a bridge between church people and those outside the church, specifically those that had done time. The response from the Anglicare director at the time was, "Great idea, we get one of these every month," and no. So I walked out of his office going, "All right, Lord, that's a not yet." Not that long after, Anglicare actually did end up employing me, as I said earlier, as a locum prison chaplain, both at Long Bay and also at Parramatta Jail. I don't believe it closed because of me, but I was the outgoing chaplain, so join the dots if you want. I was there for the last 7 months. As God would have it, the then head of Chaplaincy, David Pettit, he shared the same passion to see post-release ministry somehow become a reality. So in 2012, David and I visited a place called Break the Cycle in Macquarie Fields. Break the Cycle Glenquarry is the name of the organisation. And that ultimately resulted in me first becoming their men's shed coordinator for a short time, and then of course their first ever community chaplain. Thanks to Stephen Swanepoel, the rector of Glenquarry Anglican at the time, and also the then chair of the board of Break the Cycle. I was funded initially in that gig by Anglicare under the Haven Respite program, just for a short time. It was only like a day a week, something like 2 days a week. But Anglican Aid have really been the unsung heroes as my major source of funding for over 7 years. And at one point, their funding for me was 5 days a week, all at Break the Cycle at the time, or most of it there, 1 day here actually. Today, due to reasons beyond my control and theirs, it's become quite a trickle. As Steve House said to me once, right at the start when I was having those conversations about maybe looking at jail chaplaincy at the time, he said this to me: "Where God guides, he provides. Where God guides, he provides." And I can certainly testify he's done just that. Anyway, it wasn't long before I saw the gaping hole in the services for blokes, especially for ex-resos, right? People that done a bit of time. So I ended up writing a course over the course of time at my first year or so there at Break the Cycle. Had a bit of help from an Anglicare counsellor who was being linked to Break the Cycle at the time. The photo you can see there is a photo of David Old, who was the next chair of Break the Cycle. So 2012, I started originally to create an anger management course to meet the pressing need. I had a string of guys, one after the other, come up and go, "Oh, the effing magistrate thinks I've got effing anger management issues, the effing idiot. You guys run any effing anger management classes?" So I thought, well, okay, and seriously, there was just a number of them back to back. I'm like, okay, Lord, there's a bit of a prompt there. The material that we use in Sorted, the name of the course, is mostly modern psychology, all right? But what I did with the material that the Anglicare counsellor at the time sort of suggested that I use, okay, I translated it into what I call bloke speak. Yeah, so people would actually understand. It wouldn't fly over heads or be too wordy or anything like that. I just broke it down so I could understand it, and if I can understand it, well, then I can share it well, all right? What do they say? To teach simply is to know deeply. Over time, the course content has expanded to include many other topics that men don't typically talk about. It's my plan to see more subjects hopefully covered in the future if that's a possibility. So late 2012, Break the Cycle became a work and development order sponsor, initially just as a source of volunteer labour. But it turned out to be another way the clients at Break the Cycle were able to spend more time on the church property, because Break the Cycle's on church property there in Macquarie Fields, Glenquarry Anglican. So not just spend more time on church property, more time with church people. that would come and go. If you've never heard of work and development orders, this is what they are. They're a way for people to who can't pay their fines, a way to have their fines shrink away. People who are eligible for WDOs, as we call them, can clear their fines with approved activities instead of out of the back pocket. Once our sorted life skills course for members up and running mid-2013, I then learned we could shrink their outstanding fines even more by doing the course, because the course was considered as education, as one of those approved activities. So to date, those numbers are a smidgen old. We have actually cracked across 3 organisations $400,000 of people's fines wiped away permanently. Permanently. That's a wonderful monkey off the back, meeting the need for someone who's trying to navigate life after prison. But wait, there's more. Sorted was so successful that later that year, a course for women was then developed. It's a version of Sorted, but seriously modified to help ladies. It has since become yet another one of the many services that's now on offer at Break the Cycle. Late 2015, Sorted commenced at its second location, and by now, like I said before, Anglican Aid were funding me about 5 days a week, and I was able to work here for one of those days, branded as Break the Cycle Chaplain. So my funding at the end of 2016 plummeted from over 4 days a week at the time to just 2. Mid-2017, that sort of 6-month gap, I actually had to go and work in a factory for 3 months to actually just, stay sane and earn some money for my family and things like that. Anyway, God wasn't finished, and in his perfect timing, that wound up, and in St Luke's here, I'm told unanimously went, you know what, let's employ Stu here, in-house, a day a week. So mid-2017, that's what happened, and that has since, I think, within 12 months after that, it's now 2 days a week. So Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm now funded here, fully branded as St Luke's, and we're now set up separately as well as a work and development order, as you see in that list before. By August 2018, Sorted was planted in a 3rd location at Eaglevale, facilitated by their community chaplain, Steve Thurgar. We also set them up as a WDO sponsor to reduce fines for their people, right? The people in their part of the world, that is. If you're ever talking to a church and if they would be keen and excited about this, Anglican churches, the insurance involved, is all covered by the normal insurances that cover an Anglican church. Late 2018, a trial Bible study commenced at St Luke's, which ran straight after Sorted. It was my attempt to capitalise on the fact the guys are already here, asked them to hang around for a little bit for a Bible study, to check out God's Word that I was dropping hints of in through the course. About this time, an amazing opportunity presented itself. I went to a seminar that Legal Aid were running on these WDOs, these work and development orders. And at the end, they're all sort of winding up and packing up at the time and finishing teas and coffees and what have you. And Karina from Liverpool Legal Aid, one of the solicitors there, she's got a big heart for the same sort of people group. Out of the blue, she comes up to me and she goes, having coffee and that, she goes, "You're a minister, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Do you know, if you run a Bible study, that's considered as education under a WDO." And I went like, "Really?" Yes. So, 2019, I ran with it. Okay? I've already been prompted by God going, I've got to bring a Bible study into this group and offer for these guys. Anyway, so that got off the ground, and then this opportunity dropped, and I'm like, all right, Lord, I get it. That was the nudge that I needed. Both Sorted as well as Empower now include an optional 3rd hour. So the Sorted course is 2 hours, as is Empower. It's a 2-hour course. So we offer a 3rd hour as an optional Bible study. And subsequently relabelled what we were calling a life skills course to call it a holistic course, to be transparent in what we're trying to do, and especially to Revenue New South Wales, the body that looks after these WDOs. Someone can come along to do the two hours sorted, for instance, an optional hour of the Bible study, and their fines shrink by, so if they do that every week, their fines shrink by $150 every week. That's $600 every 4 weeks. 4 weeks in the average month, add it up, okay? Now, some of you might not actually know that you might sort of think, oh, well, that would clear their fines in no time. Not exactly. Okay? I'm not going to point out any fingers or names or whatever, mention anybody, but a guy who wandered in yesterday onto the site, I signed up for WDO, his balance was $50,000, and that's not my record. At the time it was $24,000, the first big one I ever signed up, and Legal Aid were ringing to send me a guy, refer me another guy, and I'm like, got this guy, 24k, and he goes, that's nothing. I've got a guy in the books here in Legal Aid, his balance, overdue unpaid fines, $180,000. I said, you win that being competition. Yeah.
That's a lot of Bible study.
Yeah, that's it. That's a degree or something. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, in 2018, Eagvale became a WDO sponsor as well. Early 2019, St Luke's became a WDO sponsor in its own right, completely separate now to break the cycle. And so that's some of back in March, they were the figures at the time of active WDOs. So that's not everybody that's coming. That's people that have fines that need shrinking. Okay? That's just a snapshot back in March. So across the three organisations, 41 people at any one time. Okay? Now, to date, I've seen sorted work, so that's 2 locations sorted runs at, if you haven't figured that out yet. So Break the Cycle that started, second one St Luke's, third one at Eagvale with Steve. And I long for God to raise up more oddballs like Steve and myself to run sorted in other locations across the diocese and maybe beyond. Also got some excellent news. Coincidentally, we didn't plan it that way, God did. Okay, just this week, Empower was planted at its second location right here at St Luke. We had 5 ladies plus Lauren, but that's been so awesome to have that complementary ministry. So for years I've been working with the guys, every second one of them sort of thing has a partner or a sister or a mum or a cousin or whatever, and so to be able to sort of say, hey, got some fines? No? Yes? Okay, doesn't matter. There's a ladies' course. It doesn't cost you any money. It's every week. We've also had some preliminary conversations about other churches across the diocese and one Prezi church about maybe them taking on Empower. So it's early days, but it's just talking about spreading things that work to other places.